Hi everyone, today I'm going to share with you my experience with this ASRock B850 Livemixer Wi-Fi. There are speculation out there stating that, oh, ASRock board, it will definitely fry your 9000 processor. Well, in my case, it doesn't seem to be that way. The things that you need to take care of is that make sure that you have the latest BIOS. Not only that, when you're doing the PPO2 and such, right, have some limits to it. Do not try to go to the extent to give some slacks and such. Anyway, for me to run the 9000 processor, right, like the 9950X or the 9950X3D, is of no issue. I've tested 4 boards including this. There are no such syndrome of burning the processor. And after when I tested this for a couple of months, right, when I turn the processor, right, there are no burn marks, no nothing. It just functioned. Anyway, I'd like to thank ASRock to have provided this board for me to share with everyone. And when you first time unboxing this is what you will get. You'll be provided with a set of SATA cable, one which is straight, the other right angle, a case badge, the quick installation guide, and the regulatory notice, a sensor cable. Well, this does have a sensor pin over here, nice, and a set of antenna, and of course the motherboard itself. When I first take out the board and have a look, it looks so different from what you see on the website. At the website you have all this, right, looks very shining silver and a over glossy plate, but in real life, man, I love this. In fact, I fall in love with it. It has my color theme, which is gunmetal. And best part of what ASRock have done, right, in fact, not only to this motherboard, to most of their motherboard, okay, let you have a closer look. This is the gunmetal tone. This is not very shiny, as you can see, as compared to the website on my left. It's totally two different contrasts, right? But in real life, when you look at it, right, these are all very nice tone colors. It doesn't blind your eyes or such. And the best part is that ASRock have been consistent with all their motherboard design, whereby if it is block or stripe shape or kind of design, right, it will just follow throughout the whole board. Just like this board, the Livemixer having all these curvy lines on the rear I/O heatsink, the M.2 heatsink at the top, the chipset over here, and the bottom M.2 heatsink. See, all these are with the uniform curvy line that makes it very bland as a suite. I like it. I like this very much. Now, speaking of which, right, this board does not have powered by ARGB effects. You only have a subtle ARGB effect at the bottom of the M.2 heatsink. This is the only area in one strip. Nice. Well done, ASRock. Seriously, I'm in love with this motherboard design. Alright, this is an 8-layer PCB motherboard and it's of ATX form factor. The measurements are of 244mm by 305mm. Thickness of the side and the rear VRM heatsink. The side is measuring at 33mm and the rear is measuring at 44mm. For the power phase of this motherboard, it's at 14 plus 2 plus 1 at 80 choke. It is more than enough to drive a high-end processor without any issues. Now, as for the center, this 1718 socket is catered for 7000, 8000 and 9000 series AMD processor. Right at the bottom, you have 4 DIMM slots that only cater for DDR5 and has a max capacity of 256 GB. You can run either ECC or non-ECC RAMs. Both will work. And it's of dual channel. Best part is that it has dual overclocking profile, which is meant for Expo or XMP, and at a max overclocking speed of 8000. Now, do take note. Do not assume that you populate all the 4 slots with a max capacity of 256, you can run at a max overclocking profile at 8000. Alright, that will not work. There are a total of 3 PCIe slots, where the first slot is controlled by the processor. This is Gen 5 backward compatible, and it has a max speed of x16, and there are no lane sharing. Same goes to the bottom section, there are no lane sharing, but I'll talk about the last PCIe slot later. Now, these 2 PCIe slots are controlled by the chipset. Both are having a speed of x4, and they are Gen 4, and it's backward compatible too. As for M.2, right, there are a total of 3, 1, 2, and 3, where the first 2 is run by the processor, and the third is run by the chipset. The top slot is generation 5 with a speed of x4, and is backward compatible. Whereas for the second slot, this is Gen 4 at the speed of x4. Same goes to the last slot, which is the third slot, which is also Gen 4, running at a speed of x4. All these are backward compatible. Now, do take note, earlier on I mentioned about the last slot of the PCIe. If you were to populate the third M.2 slot, this last PCIe slot will be disabled. If you populate the last PCIe slot, the third M.2 will be disabled. For the PCIe slot, this is good at the top slot, where you can see there is a metal reinforcement, and this is good when you plug your GPU. It will give sturdiness. Else, there's something which ASRock should improve on, which is the locking mechanism. On their B850M Steel Legend, which I've done the review on, there is an extension on this latch. So imagine that with a chunky graphic card, when you plug it in, right, this is at lock position. To unlock it and to pull the graphic card out, you have to reach out all the way to the bottom. So having the extension out, it'll be much more easier to release it. But one good thing is that for your GPU, right, you can just hold on both hands and to pull it out, instead of having one hand, which is good. Because some of the locking mechanism, right, they have this retention spring that brings back the position into lock. So you need to have one hand holding onto the latch and the other hand holding on the graphic card. That I find not very practical. So this is actually a good design, as in like you can have both hands. The only thing that I wanted to see is that probably you have a extended lever over here to press the latch, or having to design a button down here to press it so that this will drop in place in release position. Now for the M.2, let me just show you. For the top slot, to remove off the M.2 heatsink is pretty straightforward. Just press this button over here towards the back, pull it up, and to remove, and you expose the M.2 slot. And there are 2 thermal pads, one at the bottom, one at the top, and this is meant for 2-sided M.2 chip. See, you have both sides. If you only have one side, I will still advise you to remove both the plastic cover, right? Because plastic is not a good conductor of heat. So have this removed, then plug in, be whether single side or double side, just plug it in. And to slot your M.2, right, is pretty straightforward. Just plug it in. Okay, then at the back you have this swivel locking mechanism. Press it in and lock. That's it. And to release, just to take it out. Now, assuming that you plug this in, and to place this back, right, it's quite simple. At the rear, you have this 2 point over here. Slot it to the, okay, probably I should zoom in. Okay, there's this bar over here. So align this to the back, then put it down, press it down. That's it. It's quite simple. Now, some of you have complained that this is very noisy as it rattles, but when you plug in your M.2, right, it will be firmly there. It will not rattle. Now, as for the bottom section, okay, this is not toolless. You will need to use a screwdriver to unscrew the two screws. But one thing good is that these screws, okay, let me just remove this. These screws are captive. See, it doesn't drop. And when you put it back, right, the best way to do it is have your finger to press on the screws, then anchor it, drop it down. Okay, then you can start to fasten. And when you remove this, right, it will expose the two thermal pad and the slot. And for the locking mechanism, is quite straightforward too. Just put it in, same mechanism, swivel this latch and to lock it, and to release it's just this. Now one thing I like to emphasize on how they designed the M.2 placement, which I truly enjoyed. As you know that you'll be plugging in your GPU over here, and it's quite bulky. For ARGB cards, right, the graphic card will dissipate heat from the top and the bottom. So having this dissipation, right, ASRock has deliberately made this empty. Meaning to say there are no M.2 over here. So your graphic card heat will not hit the M.2. That's why they separate it. Nice thought. I like how they think about the design on the M.2 position. This board does have a onboard audio which makes use of the Realtek ALC 1220, and it supports 7.1 channel surround sound and is of high definition. As for the connection, this is meant for your front I/O headphone and microphone jack, followed by a UART1 3-pin connector. Now, please do not plug your ARGB devices to this 3-pin. Okay, though it's actually 3-pin, as this is only meant for advanced user that making use of an external device plug into this to do the postcode error and configuration, which we do not use. Next, you have the sensor pin, which I mentioned to you. This board comes with a sensor cable. So one end you plug to this 2-pin, the other end where you have the probe, you can place anywhere of your PC component that you want to detect temperature, and this temperature will reflect on hardware info 64 or IDA 64. Next, you have a legacy 12V RGB connector, followed by a 3-pin 5V ARGB connector. Now, if you have fans that have ARGB and ARGB strips, right, make sure you plug to this, which is in gray color. Right, the header is in gray. As mentioned, do not plug it to the black header. Alright, though this is a 3-pin, this will not work. Make sure you plug it to the gray ones. Followed by two 4-pin PWM fan headers. Now, there's one thing I missed out. At the top, you do have another 4-pin PWM fan header, and the reading is at chassis fan 1, chassis fan 2, and chassis fan 3. And all these headers are 3 ampere. It's more than enough. Next, you have the CMOS pin where you short it to reset all your configuration on UEFI to default. Followed by two USB 2.0 header, the legacy front I/O connection, whereby in the past, right at the top, this 4-pin, right, is meant for us to plug a small internal speaker that does all the beeping, because in the past we do not have the LED debug. The debug LEDs, so we depend highly on the internal speakers, whereby giving you a signal, let's say your RAM's having issue, it will give you 3 very long beeps, or maybe your projection of the HDMI port is not working, it will give you 3 short beeps, things like that. At the bottom, this is for the legacy case, whereby the power button has a LED lead. Right, so this is not used commonly right now. Else for the front, this is what we use in today, as this is the front header where you plug the power switch, the reset switch, the power LED, and the hard disk LED. Now, one thing I need to mention also at the top over here, this is a TPM module socket. Right at the front, you have 2 SATA ports. Now, I know some of you might say that I wanted 4, but this board is only catered for 2, which is right angle SATA. If you want to populate both of this port with either 2.5 inch SSD or 3.5 inch hard disk, they are not lane shared. That's the good point. And it is able to cater 3 M.2 plus 2 storage device. Total you have 5 storage device where you can make use of, and there are no lane sharing at all. Well done. 2 USB 3.0 socket, which is meant for your front IO USB type A port. One socket can support up to 2 USB type A port. In fact, it's not up to, it's to support 2 USB type A port. So when you have 2, right, you can support up to 4. But make sure that your case have additional 3.0 cable to plug to here. And make sure your case have 4 USB type A port. Alright. Next, you have this type C socket, which is meant for your front IO type C. Now, this is an excellent way to design it, as it has a transfer rate of 20 gig. I find this very useful, as I do have devices like external storage or enclosure, right, that has a transfer rate of 20 gig. I can just make use of the front. And some of the motherboard have designed in a way this is not 20 gig transfer rate, it's 5 gig or 10 gig transfer rate. Else for the 20 gig is at the rear. I have to plug my cables at the back, which is very troublesome. So this is a very good thought, having a 20 gig type C port at the front. Next, you have the 24-pin socket, whereby you pull current from your PSU to plug it to here and to supply power to the rest of your motherboard. You have 2 3-pin 5V ARGB connector, and these are in gray. At the top, you have 3 4-pin PWM fan headers, where the first one in gray, this is meant for your AIO_pump. Then you say, this is good. It has a dedicated control over your liquid AIO pump. So make sure you connect the AIO pump connector to this, as it's able to provide 3 ampere of power or current, so that your pump will run consistently without any fluctuation or leakage of current. And you can control the pump. Now at all times, right, though I mentioned that you can control, you can set it to PWM following the temperature of the processor and to generate the motor on your pump, I would still advise you to do your pump in a consistent rate. You can set it PWM, but do not set it according to what the temperature reading is. At all times, run it at 100 full speed or 80% if you find that the pump is noisy. Now you might be asking me this question: hey, running the pump at consistent, right, won't the motor wear out faster as compared to taking the readings, as in like let the motor goes up and down, ups and down? Well, imagine the coil itself. The friction is consistent, alright, without anything. If you were to do it sudden stop and sudden rise, the friction will be even more. So that's the reason why I always advise my viewers, right, or my friends and such, make sure you run your pump at a consistent rate. And you'll be good too if you run it consistent, because your temperature will be consistent. It won't be like a sudden spike whereby if the temperature reaches like 80 degrees Celsius and such, right, it takes more effort and energy for the pump to run. Else if you have it consistent, right, your motor will not have a drastic change. So that's the thing that I always mention, have your pump to run at a consistent rate. Next, you have the CPU fan 1 and the CPU fan 2. Now these two, make sure that for your liquid AIO radiator fans or your air cooler fans, plug it to CPU_fan 1. Okay, this is the master controller. And if you are doing push-pull configuration, then one set of the fans of your liquid AIO, or should I say the radiator fans, plug it on CPU_fan 1. Then the other set of the radiator fans, which is 3, or should I say both ends, right, having three fans, right, on a 360, right. The first 3 plug it on CPU fan 1. The next 3 will plug it on CPU_fan 2. And in UEFI, make sure you synchronize, as these are individual controlled. Make sure you synchronize both to run at a equal fan curve. Now followed by these two EPS connector, one is 4 pin, one is 8 pin. At all times, as I always like to encourage most of the people, just plug one will be enough, as one is drawing a wattage of either 300 or 325 or even max to 375 watt. Alright, it's more than sufficient to run your processor, high-end processor, and to draw all the vCores from your VRM. Not an issue. Unless you're doing extreme overclocking, like the LN2 liquid nitrogen 2 overclocking, then plug both. As that, you might need to pull more vCore, as in like over 1.5 or 1.6 volt. Then you probably have to plug 2. Now in the event, if you feel that plugging one is very ugly, can you plug together with the 4 pin? Yes, you can, just for aesthetic. But I can tell you that you only draw on the 8 pin, not on the 4 pin. As mentioned, unless you have drawn the vCore over the limit, then you will activate the 4 pin. At the rear, you have two projection ports, whereby the first one is a DisplayPort version 1.4, followed by a HDMI version 2.1, and both is able to project up to 4K 120Hz. And this port is making use of the integrated graphic on your processor. At the top, this is the antenna socket that supports Wi-Fi 7 and making use of 160 MHz channel bandwidth, and it does support Bluetooth. Next, you have the BIOS flashback button. Yes, you can update the motherboard BIOS to the latest by using this function, where you have to download the firmware on a thumb drive, which is at FAT32, and to plug it at this USB type A, which has a white highlight. Okay, not this, alright? This. Then you can make use of the BIOS flashback button. There are total of 13 USB type A port, plentiful. The black ones here are version 2.0. Else for the Ultra USB port, which are in dark blue, and the yellow ones, which is the Lightning Gaming, these are version 3.2, generation 1, having a transfer rate of 5 gig. Else for this is generation 2, having a transfer rate of 10 gig. Now do take note on what I'm going to say. For the Lightning Gaming port, or should I say the Lightning Gaming, this in yellow, make use of this to plug in your mouse and keyboard, as this will give you smooth transaction, no intermittence, and faster response time. Okay, be it whether your keyboard and mouse is wired or wireless, just plug it over here. And if you only make use of one, which is the wireless, the other you can just make use as an ordinary data transfer port. Now for audio stuff like your microphone and your headphone jack that make use of USB type A, do not plug it on the Lightning Gaming, as some have mentioned, and I have tried it myself, it doesn't work on the Lightning Gaming port. Instead, make use of this Ultra USB power port. Reason being, right, if you plug your audio or your microphone through here, right, it will cancel off all the static that what the motherboard is producing. So it's a very good power port. So make sure you make use of that. Next, you have the Type-C port, whereby it has a transfer rate of 10 gig. Right at the top, the RJ45 socket. This has a transfer rate of 2.5 gig. And this is the audio section, where you have the top one microphone in and the speaker out, followed by the SPDIF port. Just to share with you my thoughts, as many of you have asked me this question again and again, which motherboard is better than which? Well, it all depends on you. I can't answer that question for you. What you want the board to perform for you. So take for example, right now I'm going to choose a motherboard. First thing I'll do is I will set the budget. How much am I able to purchase a motherboard together with the processor? And often I like to use high-end processor like the 9950X or the 9950X3D, where I can do both production and gaming. And as a content creator, and I do make use of my motherboard for work, which is actually my real work. So based on the fact that I will look at the first thing, budget as mentioned. Next thing, feature set. What are the feature that it can cater for me? I would require the first PCIe slot to run at full speed. Okay, no interruption, no lane sharing, that's for sure. Either Gen 4 or Gen 5 is perfectly alright. Next thing will be the storage. Okay, the more for me, the merrier, which is on the M.2. I prefer to have 4 M.2s. 3 is sufficient, not an issue. Again, no lane sharing. Make sure that all are catered to the speed, which is X4, be it Gen 5 or Gen 4. Then followed by how capable is the motherboard able to sustain the stability on a high-end processor, which this board does that, which has a 14+2+1 with ATM choke. In fact, 60M choke and ATM choke motherboard, they are able to drive the high-end processor. It's just that the power phase I will not drop, below 12. Things like 8+2+1, this kind of motherboard I will not choose. I will choose anything above either 12+2+1 or 14+2+1. The higher the better. But I don't have to overspend on 820 plus 4 plus something, those kind of power phase. The right power phase for me will be 12+2+1 60M choke. But if you have more stability. So this board does check out very well. And also to the fact that I need the Type-C front connector to have a transfer rate of 20 gig, so that I don't have to trouble myself to connect devices to the back. So I just can plug it straight directly at the front. Also, the last point, when I piece up a board, this is also very important. The arrangement on the fan headers, which this board excellent fan placement. Where you can see at the top there are 3 fan headers. One is for the liquid AIO, which I will like to use, not air cooler. This is meant for your pump. Straight 3 ampere, consistent rate, consistent current, no interruption, no nothing. Then for my liquid AIO, right, be it push-pull configuration, which often I use single configuration. So having it to plug at CPU fan 1. And for the case itself where you have the front fan, right, I will plug to CPU fan 2. And forget to mention, all this are 3 ampere except for the CPU fan 1, right? Take note. Then where you have the bottom fans and the side fans, okay, imagine you're placing this in the O11D Mini or the Montec King 95 Pro and such, where you have the side fans and the bottom fans. I can make use of this 2 header. And best part, I always aim at motherboard that has a rear PWM fan header. Why? The routing point of your rear fan, right, is shorter. You don't have to linger your cable down to connect to the bottom. So these are the point that I will take note on. Now, there's something that I missed out. Just a sharing with you of what I mentioned. The thing that I missed out, I always miss this out. I can kill myself on this. There are debug LEDs over here. So this is an indication where you boot up, not the RAM timing, right? Once you have done the RAM training timing, verified the RAMs and such, which I will show you later. If in the event when you boot up the system and there are errors, right, things like your CPU, your RAMs, or even your projection and such, there will be LED indication over here. So it's telling you that which color code, depending on which color code, and it is labeled over here. You can take a look. If it is RAMs, right, you will just light up on the RAM and you have to troubleshoot your RAMs. I am going to test the signal strength on the wireless adapter and the wired LAN port. Starting off with the wireless, this is making use of the MediaTek, and it has a 160 MHz channel bandwidth. Now, some of you complain that this is not a good Wi-Fi adapter, but for me, I have no issues. I'm making use of a 10 gig internet service provider, so let me just connect this. You should be more than enough for this Wi-Fi adapter to catch at around 1.5 to 1.6, and also depending on the server. Okay, this is Singapore server. If nothing goes wrong, right, it can fetch up to 1.5 or 1.6 gig of data. Good ping rate. See, it went above. It's very consistent. And this is only the download. As for the upload, I believe is the same as the download. See, it's even better, 2.1 gig. So this Wi-Fi adapter, right, does fetch the data, and it's quite consistent. Now I'm just going to try another Singapore server, FPT Telecom. Let's see. Good ping rate. See, the download speed 1.9 gig or 2 gig, and on the upload, okay, let's say it's 1.9 gig download, upload 2 gig, no problem. Let's try something. I mean, a server which is further. Let me just drag down all the way, 195 mouse. Okay, let's try this. Now, sometimes it's also depend on the server. If the server doesn't cater the bandwidth right, you won't be. Okay, see, this is a 1 gig data center, so I'm fetching this amount, which is not 1.4 or 1.5 or even 2 gig. So this is common. So don't expect that, you know, you have a good Wi-Fi adapter, right, you assume that you will get a very good high data transfer rate. No, it still depends on the server. Okay, right now I'm just going to switch to something else. Let's say I do this Maxis. Hey, I thought I selected this Petalin Jaya. I wouldn't know what this server is, whether is it 1 gig or so. Let's try. Still on the Wi-Fi adapter. Okay, ping is not bad. See, if the server does, you know, provide such bandwidth, right, you'll be able to fetch the data. That's for sure. This is around 1.7 gig, which is very consistent. It doesn't drop. See, my upload is even better. So I have no idea how come a lot been telling me that this MediaTek Wi-Fi adapter, right, is not really that great. Yeah, probably the max you can go until 2 gig. If you were to use a 320 MHz channel, right, that will be even stronger. You can hit up to 3 gig or maybe 4 gig. And also depending on the server that you reach, if it's able to cater the bandwidth, right, you'll be able to draw. Alright, with this said, I'm going to disable this and going to try on the wired LAN port, which is 2.5 gig. So with the same server, hopefully it says, oops, okay, it will change the server. Okay, same, right? Oh no, it changes. Okay, start off with the local again, which is Singapore to Singapore. Ping rate 1, okay. 2.3 gig, which is quite near 2.5, which is acceptable. See, this download and upload, same thing, no diff. In fact, wired is always stronger than Wi-Fi, unless, as mentioned, you're using a 320 MHz bandwidth channel, or especially channel bandwidth, then you have higher compared to the 2.5 gig port, okay, physical wired port. Unless your wired port is 5 gig, then it'll be stronger than most of the Wi-Fi 7. Alright, I'm going to test another. Okay, back then I was testing, I think it's this, right? Okay, Maxis Petalin Jaya with the wired LAN port, 2.5 gig. See, it does reach that, and better ping rate. 2.3 gig, not a problem. Then the upload, 2.3 gig, consistent, no issue on both ports. Okay, just to show you again, earlier on I was testing this and it didn't hit 2 gig. I believe if I were to use this again, right, it will not hit 2 gig either, because as mentioned, this server only cater for 1 gig data bandwidth. See, but at this rate I'm actually grabbing the max, which is around 800 for a 1 gig data center. I believe same goes to the upload. So this is actually how I test the Wi-Fi adapter and the wired LAN port. And for those of you who have complained about this MediaTek, right, all this while I've been using this to test, I mean, the various motherboard that are making use of this adapter, right, it does work. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't drop intermittence or disconnect and such probably I guess depend on different region, I guess. There you have it, proven. The Wi-Fi adapter inclusive of the wired LAN port both work as it's catered for. Going to illustrate to you the RAM training cycle. Now, if you are moving from Intel platform to AM5 platform, or you are migrating from AM4 to AM5, this is expected. You will find that the boot time to UEFI will be longer, based on the fact that AM5 platform have this specialty whereby it will verify your RAMs before it boot into UEFI. This is only for the very first time, as it will pull all the profile, like the XMP profile, the JDAC, etc. and etc. to your motherboard. Now, on my right, you will be able to see this black screen over here. Right in front, there's a stopwatch. Now, the moment when you boot to UEFI, right, it will show on the black screen. Alright. Else for the stopwatch, when I press the start button over here, I will press the stopwatch, and to show you how long it takes for the very first time. Also to take note, the amount of capacity does affect the RAM training timing. The more capacity you put, the longer it will be. Take for example, 32 gig kit might take less than a minute. A 64 gig kit might take around 1.5 minutes or maybe 2 minutes. And a 96 gig kit might take even longer. So right now with me, I'm using a 32 gig kit, and this is how long it's going to be. I'm just going to press the start, and to press the stopwatch, here we go. During this period of time, right, if the debug LED stay there, do not touch it. Let it be. Do not off it. Do not clear CMOS or keep on resetting it. This will hurt the motherboard. Just let it run. It is right now reading your RAMs and to verify what kind of profile and what kind of JDAC and such. So this is only for the very first time. As you look at my timer on my screen, this is 31 seconds and still it's not booted up yet. So I will estimate that it will take probably about 1 minute or so to boot up. So just have patience. See, once it turns green, this is done. White is being verified. And right now it's going to boot to UEFI. See, it takes about 49 seconds to boot up to UEFI. Now, as mentioned to you, this is only the very first time. Once your RAMs is being verified, if you restart from Windows or restart the system, right, it will take a shorter time to boot up. So right now, I'm just going to shut down my machine. Starting from cold boot, right, it will also start up very fast because everything is being memorized on your motherboard. I'm just going to reset my stopwatch, and here we go. As mentioned to you, the second time when you reboot or start from cold boot, right, it will take a much lesser time to boot. I would say probably about 18 seconds or so. See, it booted. It takes 16 seconds to boot up. Mentioned to you earlier that the only ARGB effect on this board is right below the bottom M.2 heatsink. In this ARGB effect, you can control it using the Polycom application in Windows, or you can go into UEFI where there's this section you can control the ARGB effects. It's either way. Now let us test this out to see if it's able to handle the high-end processor. I'm using a 9950X AMD processor and a 32GB kit RAM, and the cooler is the Liquid Freezer 2 360, and this is the cooler, or should I say the radiator, and the fans are drawing air at the back, pushing through the radiator to cool down the processor, and in the meantime, right, there will be some air sweeping across the motherboard. And do note that I'm taking this in my room temperature at 30.6 degrees Celsius. It's between 30 to 31 degrees Celsius, and I've not turned on the aircon, just to illustrate that in a hot and humid country, right, the atmosphere surrounding it, even the radiator fans that is pulling air in, right, those are not cool air, it's warm air. As compared to colder region, right, where you have cool air around the atmosphere, your cooling will definitely be better compared to my country. The tools that I'm going to use for the test is Cinebench R23 along with Furmark. Going to run them together as I am not using any discrete graphic card, as you can see here. By the way, this is the system specs. You can pause it and take a look. I only enable the expo profile. As mentioned, no discrete graphic card is being used. I wanted to make use of the integrated graphic on the processor and to stress it even further. So having the processing and the graphic unit to compose the load. And this will give you a better picture. Okay, let me see this one. Now do take note, there is also Ryzen Master over here just to show you that the PPT, the TDC and the EDC, these are based on either I set it or by default. So for the first test, right, which is part 1, as you can see here, this is how I conducted it. I will do 3 tests on this part 1, where it consists of 30 minutes stress, 5 minutes idle, and the 10 minutes throttle, which I will record down. Then followed by the second test, same steps, and the third test, same step. Once I have all the 3 recordings right, I'll pick the best record, and this is shown over here, okay, among the 3. Then followed by part 2, which you can see over here, okay. Oops. This same configuration, same system spec, but there are slight configuration whereby I've done my own PPT voltage, the TDC amperage and the EDC amperage. As you can see over here, right? See, the PPT is okay. Probably I'll just do this now. For the PPT, it's 230 watt. For the TDC, well, this board has its own limit. Even you are to set to 215, right, the max it will go is 195. That's all. And the EDC 220, which you can see over here. And I've done the curve optimizer as -30. I did try the -20 and -15 per CCD, but it doesn't work with the curve shaper. So resulting that I have to use full -30 just to pull it all the way, stretch it all the way, and having a V core of -0.1 volt. And for curve shaper, now if you do not understand what is curve shaper, you can look in my description where I point out there is a content or documentation done by Skater Bencher. He have explained very well on what is curve shaper. Anyway, curve shaper consists of all the frequency, like your low, your minimum, your mid, your high, and your max. These are all the frequency. And each frequency, right, consists of 3 temperature point, which you can see over here: low, mid, and high. So low, I've set it to -15, mid, I've set it to -10, and high, I've set it to -5. And all this temperature point rate will be plotted to all this frequency individually, which is the medium frequency, high frequency, and the max frequency. Now, as mentioned to you, again, the second test, right, I will repeat just like part 1. Okay, so part 2, 3 tests again. The last 10 minutes I record it down, pick the best, and to show you the records. And this is what you will see. Now, heading to the setting where I've done no PBO2, just the expo profile of my RAMs as I run. See, starting, hovering very good temperature, etc. Temperature is raising up. And so basically the starting is nothing much to see. I will pull to the last 3 minutes. Okay, around here. Now, as you can see, right, looking at the temperature, it's hovering at hovering at 77 degrees Celsius on the CPU, and this is the clock speed, or should I say, take the peak over here, because this core clock, right, is taking the average of all the cores from 0 to 15, which is all total 16 core, to have this result. So take the peak and take a look at the readings on the motherboard, the VRM, which is the MOSFET, the chipset, and the DDR, and the M.2. And one thing to take note, it is very consistent on the graph. This is what you want to see when you run the machine. Very consistent and seldom deep. Deep as in, like, there are some holes over here. So this is actually telling, it's like the processor is trying to catch up, but somehow not enough voltage, so you will drop. Okay, you want to see as little drop as possible, and this is quite consistent. And there are some, boosts over here, so it's perfectly alright. Now I'm just going to take down the reading on this. So basically, the temperature for the CPU at the last 1 minute or so, 3 minutes or 1 minute, this is at 77 degrees Celsius. Then followed by the clock speed, I will take the peak, which is 5.5. Okay, I take 5.586. gigahertz. Motherboard temperature is at 46. The VRM is 47.5. The chipset is at 49.2. The DDR A2 and B2 slot 43.5 and 43.2. Okay, 43.5 and 43.2. And the M.2 47. Now coming to the score at the end of the run on the 10 minutes throttle test, right? Okay, this is the result. So I'll take this in 38690. Okay, this is by default. Okay, I've done nothing on the motherboard. It's just enabled expo profile on my RAMs. Now coming to the PBO settings, as I mentioned to you, I've done all the settings. So when I let it run, okay, as usual, the temperature is hovering fine, everything is fine, nothing to see during the first few minutes. I will drag this to the last 3 minutes, okay, somewhere around here. Okay, now take a look at the temperature. It increased, correct, but take a look as compared to the previous. I'm just going to take down the readings on all this. Okay, 83, followed by the peak speed 50, 62. Hey, wait a minute, how come the peak? Hang on a minute. Okay, I typed wrongly on the default. It should be 4.586, around there. Okay, probably I will just put, hang on. Okay, 76, no, 86, I'll leave it. 4.568, this is default. Now going back to the one that I've done the settings, this is the one. So as mentioned, right, the peak is around 5.062, I just leave it. Okay, I'll just leave it at 62. Then the motherboard temperature is at 83 degrees Celsius. No, sorry, 44.5 degrees Celsius. Then followed by the VRM is at 47, or should I say the MOSFET. The chipset is 48.3. Then the A2 and B2 DDR5, okay, 42.2, 42. Okay, 42.2 and 42. And my M.2 is 45 degrees Celsius. And again, the end result, oops, this is the result. So it's 42370. Now having a look at this, right, as it runs, right, look at the consistency of the graph. It's very consistent. This is my own settings. Okay, this is the first thing that I noticed is pretty well. There are certain dip, it's alright, but it's not often. See, it's spread out. And there are sometimes boosts, and the max boost is 5.7 as compared to the default, right? The default can't even go 5.7, see? It only goes up to 5.5 or 5.6. Else when I do the PPO settings and the curve shaper, right, see, consistently it will hit, not an issue. Now back to the chart over here, or should I say the scores over here. Looking at default, okay, with the scores like this, these are the temperature. Okay, and this is the base clock that is running. But when I did my own PBO2 settings, right, yes, indeed, the CPU did increase in temperature. But look at the clock speed. It increased much more, 500 more, I should say. Then the motherboard, the VRM, and the rest of the temperature, right, it's so much, I mean, it's lower compared to the default. This tells me that why the CPU is having such high temperature, right, based on the fact that all this component is the key factor for the system to pull and to draw more VRM current to push the clock speed. That's why you have a higher temperature, but this temperature is, you know, maintainable. 83 degrees is not that bad. Consider that I'm in a 30 to 31 degrees Celsius room temperature, and the score, see, a big jump, about 4,000 ahead, or 3,000 plus, I should say. And as I mentioned, right, it's consistent. Now, this proves that this board does able to sustain the clock speed and to run a high-end processor, including is able to push even further if the settings are correct. It is indeed a very mature board and an excellent sustainable, as in, like, you know, holding on to the frequency and able to push even further. Okay, storytelling time, my favorite section. Starting off with the pros. First thing, when I unbox, I really love this color, all gunmetal, which is my favorite. And the design of this whole thing, right, it's so sleek. They just follow the pattern, as in, like, the curvy, you know, lines, which is very subtle. It's not so popping out. And I did notice that, take a look on the PCB on the motherboard, it follows the line, see, it doesn't stop there, so it blends in the whole thing, okay, or should I say in one suite, very uniform kind of design, which I like. So there are no sudden, you know, like having curvy, having straight lines, then having, you know, tons of unnecessary wording and such. But this board doesn't have that. In fact, all the labeling, right, are very subtle. But I would suggest that if you really want to bring up the characteristic of this board, right, having the Livemixer at a larger wording. Anyway, it's just word. And also to embed this, right, to illume this word Livemixer, that would be great. You know, a touch of white. See the difference? So this is something which is very nicely done. The heatsink, fantastic cooling. I've tested the M.2, okay, be it benchmark or be compiling the videos of this content. Yep, believe it or not, what you see here, right, in fact, I've compiled using this motherboard, which it did sustain, you know, when it's at max load, right, it's 47, as I did the benchmark, as I show you. But when I do the compilation of this whole content and doing some artwork, right, it doesn't go above 45 degrees Celsius. Fantastic. And the cooling on the VRM, right, now I noticed that this is identical with the Steel Legend, but the thing is, this is an 8-layer PCB, okay, that is a 6-layer. With 8-layer, right, all your traces will be loosely, you know, evenly and loosely distributed throughout the whole motherboard, so that it's not, the traffic is not so busy as compared to the 6-layer. So that's why for the 6-layer, right, the temperature will go above 50 over degrees Celsius. Else for this, right, having the 8 layers and having this kind of beefy, thick, I mean heatsink, just like the Steel Legend, it works perfectly. In fact, it doesn't go above, as I shown you on the benchmark, it doesn't go above 55 degrees Celsius. In fact, it's below 50 degrees Celsius. Most of them max is at 47 degrees Celsius. And also I find out that when using this board, right, it's so much stable as compared to using any kind of other boards. Okay, why do I say so? Not that other boards are not stable, they are stable, but not as stable as this. Because throughout the whole compilation, right, there are no stop. You know, when you do some of you might understand where I'm coming from. When you compile for example, your videos and such, right, or 3D stuff, right, there will be a time where you'll pause for quite some time, then it will continue on. This board doesn't do that. The characteristic of this board, right, is rock stable throughout. When you compile it, right, you just move, continue to move without breaks, which is nice. And I believe this is why when I show you the result, you have witnessed yourself. This is drawing at 227 watt CPU power package, but yet it maintained at 5.067 around there, or 5.08. That is the gigahertz that you will sustain. Okay, and also I believe that ASRock have purposely done the TDC to lock at 195. Okay, as your witness, I have set the TDC to 215, but yet it's locked to 195 ampere. I believe they want stability. I believe they want you to enjoy the stability of this motherboard, whatever you're doing. In fact, this board is truly meant for video editors, audio editors, and also 3D artwork. It is so rock stable and consistent. And best part that, you know, it has a transfer rate of 20 gig for the Type-C, and something which, you know, I wanted on this port, that is to have the USB 4.0 Type-C port that has 40 gig transfer rate. That will be even better. Or to have it to project out using a Type-C cable. That will be fantastic. But nevertheless, based on the budget on this board itself, right, the 20 gig transfer rate is sufficient for me. And also another thing is that the locking mechanism on the M.2 only at the top. I wish that the bottom they have the toolless tool. And best part on the M.2 spacing, right, 3 is enough. I wish there are 4. But anyway, the best part is about the spacing. Take a look at this. Easily over here you can put another M.2, but they refuse, they do not place it down here. Why? When you plug your thick graphic card, okay, let's say it's this thick, your M.2 is not beneath the graphic card. As you know, the ARGB cards, right, okay, assuming this is actually the graphic card, the heat will dissipate from the top and also from the bottom, so nothing is hitting on the M.2 at this area. That's why they have designed it such a way, okay, to leave a gap. And also another thing is that having a gap in between M.2, right, is the right choice. If you put it too close, right, heat transfer on the same area. So this is a good choice. More space, more air, and more cooling. And I've tested this. This is very beefy. Okay, as I compile, right, it doesn't go above 45 degrees Celsius. In fact, it's hovering around 44 or such. But when I do the benchmark, right, yes, it did went max on default 47 degrees Celsius. Okay, but not above 50. So this is a very capable M.2 heatsink. Also, the heatsink at the bottom. Okay, I did test with my Gen 4, Gen 3 M.2. It does check out very well. The temperature is sustained. I thought that this is too thin, but in fact it's quite thick and it's quite well spread. So the thermal on the two M.2s, right, is also very fantastic. Now, the thing that I wish ASRock will improve on this, the locking mechanism on the PCIe slot should have extend a lever just like the Steel Legend, the B850M Steel Legend, where you can easily press to unlock to remove your graphic card. With this, right, it's kind of hard. When this is actually mounted in a case, right, you have to really, you know, go deep to push this to release. So it's something that, you know, ASRock should actually think about it. Then did I mention about this? I like the locking mechanism on the RAMs itself. It's both sided, cause when you slot your, you know, RAMs, right, when you unlock it, you can do it, you know, single straight shaft to the slot, and to remove it, right, you just press on both ends and it will just spring out, so that you can just bring it out straight instead of having, you know, one end which is fixed. Then you unlock this, right, I have to slant the RAM a bit before I can pull out the whole thing. This is something which I like. Now, other than that, what else I want to mention about? Oh, okay. Now, as mentioned to you, I've used this motherboard to compile this content. Okay, and I've tested the audio and my mouse and such. When I plug my mouse over here, okay, my mouse is not really that great on the DPI. In fact, it's about 800. I noticed a great difference when I plug this, the yellow port which says Lightning Gaming, as compared to this ports. The sensitivity, right, on this port, right, is very nice. The feel is very nice, smooth and buttery, and the pointing is very precise. Else, if I were to connect to, you know, the USB over here, right, okay, the USB 2, definitely there will be a impedance when you set the tracker to fast. All right, there is a certain jerk down there. There is no movement kind of flow. Else for this, right, is slightly better, but it's not as good as the yellow port. Okay, I love the yellow port right now, and I think I plugged the mouse and keyboard, right, on the wrong port on my Nova, which is a X870E. Probably I need to change that. I get to really feel the difference. And not only this, the audio console, okay, which I already noticed on the Nova, which has this ultra USB port, power. Why do I say this? If you are to plug any audio interface on other ports, when you crank up the volume, right, you can hear the hiss and static, electronic static. Else, when you plug to the ultra USB power port, right, you can't hear a single static. It will just filter out nicely for you. Smooth run. Now, is this board for gamers? Yes, it is. Since it can do, you know, stable work and such, right? Why not? As game doesn't really take too much load. It only depends on the graphic card and your processor. And I believe that it is able to cater for, you know, a 5000 series graphic card, not a problem. Or even a 4090, not a problem. So if you intend to get this, okay, the main thing, right, it's meant for content creator, audio editor, and 3D animators. If you are the main workforce on this and have some gaming in life, right, yes, this board is for you. So whatever you do with this board, right, is quite stable. And I also noticed one thing about this board, based on the experience with this and with Nova. Now for Nova, right, normally before I do a content, I will run Prime 95 for a couple of days, and for ADA or OCCT. These are things that I would test, like the RAMs, the processor, etc, etc. I noticed that for Nova, right, initially when you do the configuration on PBO2, the curve optimizer and the curve shaper, right, yes, it will let you run. Let's say you have total of 10 cycle. It will run until the 8 and then crash. Then you have to reconfigure again and do the run again. Else for this board, right, I wouldn't say it's fussy. It is very direct. If you to configure to that and you run the first pass, be it Prime 95 or OCCT or whatever, it will just reject. It will just crash, telling you, no, this is not the configuration that make me stable. Okay, this is what the board is all about, stability. So when I start to tune, right, I don't have a problem to redo and redo, because it's like, you know, straight away telling me that, no, you can't take it, no, you can't take it, no, you can't take it, until the point where you can take it, you just accept it. And when you accept it, right, it will just run smoothly, even it's drawing at a high current, which I mentioned to you is 227 watt, right, it will stay consistent, very rock stable. And you can see the graph, right, the clock frequency graph, right, is pretty flat consistently. And when it can't catch, right, you would take a breather, but the breather, right, or should I say the drop, right, is not so drastic as some of the boards that I've tested. It is far apart from the consistency on the load. So this is actually a very nice board. Now, this board, yes, 100%, if you are into, having a workstation, right, one thing stability, one thing all the consistency, even when doing compilation or work and such, right, without any hiccups, and best part, consistency on the mouse, toggling and the precise marking, especially when you're doing artwork. This board, fantastic. And also to those who actually don't do audio editing, right, you might have console with USB plug, right, solid board. You don't have to think about any other board. It's better, in fact, it's better. Okay, so sorry to say this, I gotta bring in the brand to talk about it. Initially, I enjoy working on a ASUS Pro Art, but somehow that, right, when you do compilation or when you do certain things, right, you will feel that when you compile a artwork, it will just pause there, then you continue. Else for this, right, no such thing as called pause. You just continue and continue and continue. Even if it pause, right, it's not a long pause, it's a short pause and you just flow on. In fact, you can't feel the pause at all. That's what I'm trying to say. Another thing is that the filtration of the audio, fantastic. It's much better compared to the Pro Art. And the thing that this thing loses out, as mentioned, there is no USB 4.0 port. Okay, I wish there is, so that I can make use of the 40 gig transfer rate. But nevertheless, based on budget, the 20 gig is more than enough. Now, besides this, okay, I've talked about that. Yep, correct. Yeah, basically this is what I'm going to talk about this motherboard. In fact, it's a very mature board. I like it a lot. Oh, speaking of about the design, right? Subtle touch of ARGB at the bottom. No nonsense all about on the motherboard. This is something which I like. It's just like the Pro Art, no nonsense on ARGB. But some of you might like it, but for me, I don't like it. Alright, hope you guys have actually enjoyed what I've shared with you. These are all my thoughts. Yep, tons of things to talk about this, because when I start to play with this board, right, I seriously made use of this board to compile this video, okay, and to do the artwork, to do the certain audio effects and such, mainly on my voiceover. So, yep, extremely good board for work. Alright, with this said, I'd like to thank ASRock to have provided this board for me to share with everyone. Now, please don't go away when I say after this, alright? For those of you actually new to my channel, welcome to my channel. If you like my content, do remember to subscribe and to hit on the notification bell button. Now, I will be sharing with you the UEFI configuration and such, and the interface right after this. So don't go away, see ya. Now, this is the UEFI interface, but I need to let you guys know it will jump into advanced mode. You can toggle the EZMode by pressing F6, and this is how it looks like, where it shows you the system stats, as in like your processor, your RAM that's populated on the DIMM slot, and this you can enable expo profile. Let me just show you. See, you can set auto expo, then followed by the SATA port over here and the M.2, then the temperature of the CPU, the this is my radiator fan RPM. Okay, supposedly it should have the AIO pump, but this liquid freezer 2 does not have the sensor, so it doesn't, but I know it's working. Then you can set the thermal throttle limits, as in like to increase the TJ temp, as in like your throttle limit. Majority, if you set to auto, right, it will be 95. It will be 95 degrees Celsius. Okay, you can set it lower. Probably you don't want it to go above 85 degrees Celsius and such. You can do that. So right now I'm just going to go back to auto. Then over here you get to see the motherboard temperature, the CPU voltages, the time stamp. You can click this and to change your date and time. Alright, and for boot priority, it's quite straightforward. Assuming that this, okay, in fact it's Windows 11, And at the bottom, this is another M.2 or maybe a SSD or a hard disk where it has the Linux OS. If you want to boot the system with Linux OS, you can just pull this priority up so it becomes at the top. This will boot to Linux. If not, you can pull back and to load with Windows. And right at the top, if you have done all the settings over here and you want to just set it back to default, you can just click on here or press F9 to load default. Save and exit, don't have to explain. Now PBO, you can enable it or disable it. Okay, if you are challenging enough, right, you can do your own configuration, which I will share with you later. Polychrome, as mentioned to you, right, the ARGB effect on your motherboard, there's one whole strip. If you want to turn on, turn off, right, you can use this to turn on and turn off. It's pretty straightforward. Then the languages you can set, see, up to what you understand. Then coming to the advanced mode, is either you press F6 or to click on this, and this is the advanced mode. Now something I need to warn you guys is that in the advanced mode, right, when you see all this, right, see, it's pretty hard to see. Okay, even when you do configuration, see, if I were to put, see, I can't see the numbers at all. So what I'll do is, let me just, okay, auto. Let me just change the font text where you can do it over here. See, the BIOS setup text color. I'm just going to set this to orange. Then I'll just save and exit, and I'll come back again. So don't go away, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. See, the text changed to this, so it's much easier. Wow. See, I can see the wordings right now. Alright, now on the advanced mode, starting off with the main subcategory where it shows you the UEFI version of your motherboard, which I'm using the latest 3.2. Oh, take note, if you're using you're using ASRock, right? As mentioned earlier, that a lot of you have been saying that, you know, it's going to burn my, you know, CPU and such, etc., etc. RAM's not going to boot up and such during the RAM timing. Well, do yourself a favor, update to the latest BIOS. That will help heaps. Now, next you'll be seeing the processor, what you're using, then the max boost speed, and the memory that you populated, the A2 and the B2. Then followed by, okay, all this at the bottom. Let me just explain to you. This is the search function on F. You can press F4. Then let's say you want to configure certain things, right? You can just type in. Okay, let's say fan. Then you just search. See, it will pop out all this for you to search. For you to configure. Let's say you want to set to the fan tree. Just click on it. See, it will bring you to that page. So that's very easy. So that's the search function. Languages, I don't have to say. Then for the time, date, you can just set it here. Now, next will be the OC tweaker. Right, game mode. I wouldn't know what this is. It allows you to enter and disabling either the OK. This probably you have to play with it if you are a gamer. I myself don't use this, so I just leave it. Generation 5, or should I say Zen 5 gaming optimization, I will just leave it as AMD Agisa default. Okay, in the event, if let's say you're using a high-end processor and you know that it's going to run at 200 watt, you don't want it to run at 200 watt. You want to limit it half. You can do this at the TDP to 105 watt. You can enable this, and this will drastically drop the wattage from your processor from pulling from the motherboard. But if you do this right, there will be a performance drop, so take note on this. At the moment, I'll just leave it disabled. Performance boost, well, you can set this are meant for your Cinebench runs, which I find not appropriate. I'll just leave it auto. Now, performance preset. This is for people who don't really, want to go into details on the PBO2 settings and such. You can do this. See, there are lots of configuration over here. Starting off, you wouldn't want your CPU to go above 85 degrees Celsius. You can just set this. Or you want to have some performance gain by dropping the temperature. You can set the PBO, the curve optimizer to -20, -30, or -40. In the event, if let's say you have set to -40 and your system hang, come back to the UEFI, set it lower, as in like -40. If you still can't, set it to -20. But majority of you can run on -30, not an issue. But I would say that set it to -20. So oops. Reason being, right, you give more slack to the machine. Don't snatch everything in. If a string is too taut, right, it will just snap. Alright, that's my experience. Or if you don't want it to run at 85 degrees, you can run at 75 degrees Celsius and not more than that. And same thing, you can play with the curve optimizer over here. It's just a one click and that's it. Right now I'm just going to leave it auto. Platform thermal throttle. Well, this is as what I mentioned to you on the EZMode. You can set to 95, you can set to 85 degrees and such. At the moment, I just leave it auto. CPU clocking, you can customize, and to do all your vCore, you want to set the vCore at what temperature, what vCore fixed point. Then your CCD1 and CCD0, right? Now, the base clock is 4.3. You can set to 5.7, 4.7 and such, up to you. But let me warn you, by setting the base clock higher, right, you are pulling more vCore. Okay, if you do not do PBO settings, which I will leave this as auto, I won't touch. GFX overclocking, this is meant for your integrated graphic, which I will not touch. Next is the DRAM frequency. If you know that you are running DDR5 at 6000, right, you can set it at 6000 like what I've set here, the Expo profile. If not, if you want to try higher, right, you can just go up. But I find no point because it's like you want to run your RAMs in as 1:1 ratio in AMD platform. So I just leave it at 6000. Then for the memory content restore, well, this is for the memory timing. If you have done verification for the first time, and let's say you have done reset on your BIOS and you don't want to go through the hassle to rerun the memory training timing, right, you can just disable this. So whatever the last record that is being verified, right, it will be based on that record. But do be careful if you disable this. In the event if you have to swap your RAMs, right, and that is not the RAM of the previous setting, then you're gonna have a problem boot into UEFI. Then you will need to clear CMOS. Alright, but I will just leave it enable. Next will be DRAM profile configuration. When you do this, as you can see, I reset my Expo, and it happened that this King Bang RAMs, right, very good tight timing. Okay, I love this King Bang's RAM, and there are two profiles, Expo and XMP. Okay, but of course AMD I will just use this. Unless this is Intel, then I will use for AMD I will use Expo profile. If this is a Intel platform, right, I will use Expo. I'm so messy. Alright, for AMD I will be using Expo profile. For Intel I'll be using XMP profile. Okay, that was a struggle. Now you can also go into the DRAM timing configuration to do your own set of timing. Okay, right now it's pretty tight. If you want to challenge yourself to do 26 and such, you can go ahead, by all means. But when you do a tighter timing, right, you will need to pump up the DRAM voltage. Okay, which I will not encourage you to do so. It's up to you. I want stability, I just want to run on Expo profile. But you can of course configure it yourself. Okay. Next, all this, right, I will not touch. These are all your DRAM settings, as in like the voltage that your RAMs need to run on, which mine is 1.45. Okay, though it's in red, it's perfectly alright. I'll just leave it. And this DRAM VPP voltage is always at 1.8. Just leave it. Do not touch. The rest of this, right, in fact, is already clocked for you when you load the latest BIOS and when you come to UEFI for the very first time. As mentioned to you, right, verification through the RAM training timing. So this will be listed over here. As it detected that my RAMs are the 6000. So 2000 times 3000, right, is 6000. So that's why my Infinity Fabric frequency is at 2000. And as for this UCOG DIF1 mode, gamers would like to configure this to 1:1 ratio, but by default when it detects during the RAM training timing, right, it's already U clock equal to memory clock, so I don't have to set anything. Other than that, right, all this over here where you have the SOC uncalled OC voltage, right, all this you can don't touch. But the trick is, if you want lower temperature, right, normally this SOC you call OC voltage, you can run at 1.1. You don't have to run 1.2. It's more than sufficient to run, even if you do configure PBO2 and such. Okay, I normally will do this. Other than that, this might not be in favor of anybody, but personally I will just use it just to lower down the temperature. See, I've done the offset minus 1000, and I wouldn't know why this is not configured. I will configure to level 2 for the load line calibration. As you can see on the graph over here, right, for ASRock, no brainer. Okay, it's either you go high voltage or you go low voltage. I will just set it at the middle. Okay, not high, not low, just nice. I'll just leave it as it is. So this is under OC tweaker, and whatever you configure over here, right, you want to save the profile, you can save it. See, and to choose the empty slot and to rename it and such. Okay, probably I just do one example. See, when you click on save again, right, see your example is already down there, the configuration you have configured. And at times, right, when you reset your CMOS setting, still on the same version, you can load your default profile. Okay, depending on how much you save, the profile you save, as I showed you earlier, so you can just pull out. So this is what I meant by that. Next will be the advanced mode CPU configuration. Right, all this I'll just leave it as it is by default. Now, for those of you who are actually running single core on games, right, you can trigger this, the SMT mode. Normally people will disable it so that it will not use CCD 0 and CCD 1. If you have a processor that has 2 CCD configuration, right, if you have single, right, you can also use this. It will just focus on one single core for your gaming. Okay, right now just leave it auto because I don't really play games. AVX 512, this is meant for your video editing and coding. Just leave it. Next, PCIe configuration. This is your resizable bar for your discrete graphic card. Be it whether you are... I'm only familiar with NVIDIA cards, so this is enabled by default. Okay, so leave it, don't touch. Followed by onboard devices. Now, for onboard devices, these are the things that you can do. Okay, restore onboard LED default and such. Now, for this RGB LED, okay, as mentioned to you on EZMode, okay, there's this polychrome RGB on. Down here, right, the RGB LED is the same. You can off the ARGB effect on your motherboard, which is below the M.2 heatsink. Okay, display priority, I'll just leave it. Based on the fact it will auto detect. Unless you don't have an external discrete graphic card, then you use the internal. Always internal. But I'll just leave it as mentioned to you. Now, onboard HD audio, this is the onboard audio. For me, I'm using the audio interface, so I'll just disable this. Okay, the things that you don't need, best is to disable it. Onboard LAN, yes, I do use it. This is the Wi-Fi adapter. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I do not. But most of the time, I don't use it, so I just disable. Because most of the time, I actually on the wired. As for Bluetooth, yes, I do use it. I'll just leave it auto. So these are things on onboard devices configuration. Storage configuration. Now, in the event you want to, you have plugged the 2.5 inch SSD or the 3.5 inch hard disk. When it's booting up on Windows, right, you want to unplug it instantly instead of turning off the machine. Come here to configure, depending on which SATA port you have plugged in, right? Just enable this hot plug, as you can see here. So with this function on, right, at that SATA port, if let's say you're in Windows, just eject on Windows and you can just unplug the SSD or hard disk. So this is pretty straightforward. At the moment, I didn't plug any SATA, so there isn't any. Now, for NVMe configuration, not really configuration, it's just showing you what are the M.2 drives that you have in this system. Okay, next will be ACPI configuration. Okay, I know, again and again, I really have to find some time to actually do the remote to show you guys how I do it, as in like to remote start my PC using the smartphone. Anyway, this is the only configuration that I will enable, which is the PCIe device power on. The rest you can try, okay, but I'll just leave it as it is. I don't touch the rest. I only use on this PCIe devices power on. USB configuration, by default this is enabled. If you don't use I don't think you're not gonna use all the USB devices. If you don't use it, okay, you can disable it. Alright. Now, trust computing, these are all the security such the encryption key and etc, which I don't touch either. This is for enterprise level. AMD CBS, okay, I'm not going to go in depth on this, alright, just to show you what you have over here. And some of you might go to the net BIOS common option to disable the graphic, which I'm showing you right now, the graphic card configuration. This is discrete graphic card only. You can set it to enable. So at all times, right, your system will just recognize your discrete graphic card and not your integrated on your processor. And same goes to the UMA version. You can set, legacy or non-legacy, up to you. But normally we do not touch these two. We will only touch this. It's either you enable to use your discrete graphic card, or you disable it to use your integrated graphic. But at all times I'll set it to auto. Audio configuration, okay, these are really in-depth. If you are into audio, right, I'm not too sure what does this do, but you can enable it. And the audio I/O, see, there are lots of interface, HDP, PDM, etc, if you are using those devices. Okay, I'll just leave it auto. Now the rest, I wouldn't have a clue what those are. I'll just go through with you. PCIe loop back mode. Oh, it's just easy, enable, disable. Same goes to this. In fact, yeah. Persistent mode for legacy endpoints. Anyway, there are description over here, but I don't use it. Same goes to this retimer margining support. Okay, interesting. Okay, just gonna escape. So these are all the configuration. You can take a look. Up to you. Now SMU common option. Right, these are the things that you can set to. I'm not going in depth into it. This is forcing the system to take the TDP control. By right default, it's actually at 100 and I think it's 170 to 200. Oh no, 200 watt. So if you want to set it higher, right, you can set over here. Okay, but I wouldn't advise you to touch anything at all down here unless you are expert in overclocking. Then yeah, you can probably use this. Then the rest, okay, I'm not going to go in depth, just to show you SoC miscellaneous control. Okay, it's just simply enable, disabling, etc. Again, wouldn't know what all these control are for, so if it's useful to you, you can use it. Prom 21 chipset common option. Wow, in depth. Okay, USB, PCIe, and etc. The M.2s. And in depth. Oh, okay, this is crazy. Alright, chipset SI value. Wonder what this is. Take effect on cold restart. Okay, not gonna touch. A1, A2, I have no idea what this is. Dual Prom 21 port number. Okay, probably this is meant for some ports, legacy port and such. PCIe power management features. Okay, I wouldn't touch. Auto. So these are things that you can do at AMD CBS section, which is this. Okay, AMD PBS. Okay, again, just to show you AMD firmware version, it will show you the ARGB version and such. Next will be the graphics feature. Okay, probably you can set this disable and enable for your HDMI, which is then the AMD common platform module. Okay, is this setting the okay? Now for this, right, AMD common platform module, I guess you can set accordingly. Okay, majority of these are actually auto. In fact, what I see is that, let's say for example M.2_1, which is your top M.2 slot, the link speed, if you are using Gen 5, you can just set it Gen 5, so you bypass the verification, you will boot faster. I guess this is what it does. I'll just set it to auto, leave it as it is. The RAID mode, okay, you can set enable. In fact, nowadays seldom people use RAID mode on M.2 unless you're using SSD or hard disk. Anyway, these are the features that you can set. Alright, okay, finally come to the AMD overclocking. This is my favorite section. Okay, just click on accept. These are the configuration that you can do, but I will only touch on this precision boost overdrive and this SoC uncall OC mode. And if you fancy to run eco mode, you can click on eco mode. Okay, you can just set to what you want to run, as in like the voltage. But most of the time I won't run on eco mode. First thing I'll do, enable my RAMs to optimize. So use this SoC uncall OC mode. Set this to enable. Okay, that will optimize your RAMs. Next will be the precision boost overdrive. Okay, as you can see over here, by right it's actually on auto. You can set it to enable or advanced. I'll set it to advanced. Then the limits, right, a lot will just follow the motherboard, but I like to have my own control, as I wanted to see a consistent graph line on the clock frequency. So I'll set it to manual, and these are my configuration. And do take note, if you want to declare, take for example PPT, you want to make 200 watt. Don't just leave it 200, alright, it will not work. As you can see here, right, okay, it's milliwatt, so you got to add 3 more zeros to make it 200 watt. For the amperage on the TDC and EDC, right, see, it's in fact 215 ampere, and for EDC is 215 ampere. I just add 3 more zeros behind, based on the fact it's milliampere. Okay, next is this precision boost overdrive scalar control. Now a lot will just hit to 10x. Well, you can do that, but it's going to pull more V core, and I do not touch this at all based on the fact that I wouldn't want to push my processor that much, which for long period of time, right, is no good for your processor. This is what I find out. So I'll just leave it to 1x by default. CPU boost clock override. This does give you a certain kick. As in, like, you can set it positive, then you can go up to 200. Okay, can you go to 300? Oh no, okay, 200 is the max. Okay, so we try to feeder with it together with your PBO2, it will give you 200 megahertz. But for me, right, I want consistency. Why do I have to drive my processor so hard? Okay, so I'll just leave it as disabled. I will not touch it at all. Platform thermal throttle control, well, this is as mentioned to you, you can set 85. Okay, you can set manual. You can set to 85 so that your system will not go above 85. Or you can set to 95. It's all up to you. I will just leave it auto. Okay, now take note, this configuration over here, right, the platform throttle under advanced, it's the same as this. Let's see, where is it? This one. Okay, so either you set here or set in advanced overclocking mode, right? Oops. Okay, this one is the same. Either one. Okay, but do not set both at the same time with different degree. You will confuse the system. So either you use this or you use that. I would advise you, if you are using PBO2, right, use it over here to control your temperature. GFX curve optimizer, I will not touch. This is got to do with your integrated graphics, which I don't think anybody will fiddle with it. Next will be curve optimizer. Now for dual CCD, right, as you can see over here, I've set to -25. I know that both of my CCD 0 and CCD 1 can run at -25. One is actually at 20, the other one is 25. Okay, so you can set to per core, as I told you. See, CCD 0 is always a negative value, so I know that this can run at 25, and the other one best to run at 20. First 8 core 25, last 8 core 20. Okay, because the last 8 core is the weakest. So this is what it meant. Else, if you want to give it a try, right, which I succeeded, all core I can use negative -25. Okay, but this is kind of like aggressive because the max to me, right, is 30. So normally if you are to configure, okay, for open view on motherboard, right, I will set it not to the max but 25. Probably might say that, hey, it's only 5 more. I mean the magnitude, why do you have to save it? Well, I just want to keep my processor consistent, okay, pulling the power as little as possible, but not to the extent of, you know, draining it. So I will set 25, but normal operation, what I'll do, right, I'll just set it to per core CCD, just on the safe side. I'll set it to 25 and 20. That's, oops. Oh my goodness. Okay, sorry about that. Curve optimizer, yeah. As I mentioned to you, first 8 core, I'll set it to 25. The last 8 core, I'll set it to 20. Okay? And do note that I did notice something about the processor. As prolonged of using high magnitude, right, or should I say too low of a magnitude, let's say you put 30 and maybe 25, right, till a certain period of time whereby maybe you use 1 year later or so, right, your system will seem to go unstable. This is what I noticed. Then you have to come over here to change the magnitude. So best bet, in fact, is to set 2015. Okay, this will prolong the life of your processor to run happily with this magnitude. If you set it to 25, right, in fact, to be honest with you, you are trying to degrade your processor much more. Okay, and you think that, hey, Kyo, you might be crazy. This is negative value. What kind of hurt it will be? Well, your processor needs certain voltage, right? So if you take away the voltage from it, right, will it be happy? No. So that's what I'm saying, that give and take situation. If you want to prolong, just leave it 2015. Okay, that's my advice to you. But of course, it depends on the bin on your processor. If it doesn't work right, then you have to bring it down. Okay, probably 1510. Okay, of all the 9000 series, right, that I play with, right, on dual CCDs, right, normally it will work 20 to and 15. Confirmation, it will work. Okay, if it can't work, right, then probably you get 1510. Alright. Okay, enough about the CCDs. Next thing, curve shaper. As I mentioned to you, this is very daunting, as there are 5 different frequency points. Okay, with minimum, low, mid, high, max. All this, right, each have its own temperature point, which you can see here: low, medium, and high temperature. I'm talking about here. So that's why you see that earlier on when I explained to you how I do the benchmark, right, it's based on this temperature that I've set. Okay, 10, 15, and 10. Sorry, 5. Wait. Okay. The low temperature are set to 15, then the mid temperature are set to 10, and the high temperature will be magnitude. And depending on your bin of your processor, if it's good, right, you can go even further, as in like 25, 15, or 10. You gotta play with it, alright? Now, a lot of people will just do it like they will not do on the first 2 temperature. Okay, they'll just leave it auto until, okay, let me just set this. They will not set this low temperature and the mid temperature for the frequency. They will just hit down straight to high temperature and to set it to whatever value that you wanted. This is definitely going to hurt your processor, okay, because you're giving a big jump. It's like not gradually drop, it's like suddenly push you off from the plane, something like that. Or would you want someone to actually, you know, guide you and tell you that, okay, are you ready? All right, I'm just going to push you right now. Okay, push you off from the plane and you parachute down. You would prefer that, right? Rather than, you know, you're walking and getting ready to parachute down and someone just kick you off the plane. So this is what it meant. But anyway, for this configuration in Curve Optimizer, right, normally on the mid frequency and the low frequency, you don't have to touch it because this is not where the action comes. The action will come only on mid, high, and max. So as you can see on my part 2 test, right, I've shown you the mid frequency, high frequency, and the max frequency with all the temperature settings. Right. For more information, head down again to my description where there is a content done by Skater Bencher. He did a very good job. Okay, read whatever, watch whatever he got to say to you. Alright, it's very educational. Okay, this is Curve Shaper done. Everything done on the AMD overclocking. Now, coming to this, I shown you, I changed the color so that you can easily read, right? So these are all in orange, as you can see. So you can set different colors up to you. Then mouse relative movement delta. Right now my mouse is very responsive. Okay, if you find that your mouse is not responsive on your UEFI, you can increase the speed by 2 times or 4 times. But when you increase the speed, right, you need to save the profile and to reboot back to UEFI again to take effect. Okay, this is not Windows, alright. It doesn't take the thing at an instant. Now, active page on entry. This is only meant for advanced mode. Let's say you want to boot to UEFI and to see this OC tweaker page instead of the main page. So you can set down here active page to OC tweaker. So every time when you boot to UEFI, right, you will come to this page. I mean the OC tweaker page, which is this. Then followed by Full HD UEFI BIOS. Leave this as it is, alright. I've tried this before, disabling. I screw up my whole screen. So I end up had to clear CMOS. So don't touch this, leave it as it is. UEFI setup style. Well, this is advanced mode. When you boot up, you will be in advanced mode. If you want the easy mode, which is this, you can do that too. All is needed over here, the setup style, just set it to easy. That's simple. Now, coming to tools. Yes, one of my favorite. Now, this tool over here, as I mentioned to you, your onboard ARGB effect. Okay, not your RAMs, not your fans. Only on your motherboard. You can come here to set the effects. And for static, make sure you know the ARGB numbers. As you can see here, right now is 000, is all in black. So you need to key in, like, you know, maybe 168, 253, 253 or so, etc, etc. You need to know the codes, right? And for brightness, well, the lesser number you have, your ARGB effect will be dimmer. The max will be at 255. Alright, then you apply to all channels. Then you can save this in onto MCU, but no, I won't do that. I'll just leave it. Next will be hardware monitor. Okay, this is where the fun comes. Top section, it will show you the CPU temperature, the motherboard temperature, the sensor that if you have plugged to it, it will show. Then your fan speed, all will be down here, inclusive of the healthiness of your V cores. I mean the voltage cores and such. It will show all down here. The 12 volt rail, the 5 volt rail, and the 3 volt rail. Alright. Then at the lower section where you can see this, right? Okay, I know my CPU fan 1, which is only 1 ampere. These are my radiator fans. I will set it to performance. Okay, right now look at it, silence, right? See? This is at 1400 RPM. If I'm going to set it to performance, see what happens. See, it went up. And one thing good about ASRock is that you can set according this profile. Okay, when you boot into Windows, right, though you set performance, right, it doesn't mean that it will ramp up at 1800 something. It will be at a lowest mode based on the temperature. Okay, take note on this. Or you can set it to custom. See, based on the temperature, let's say it's 50 degree, you want to throttle your fan, right? Spin your fan at 65% or maybe higher, up to you. Okay, as you can see, I'm not too sure you can hear, but my fans is ramping up. So normally I'll just set it default. So all this point, right, is point to point. It's very manual work. But I like this interface more than anything else. If you do not have the time to do this, right, you can just put performance, standard, or silent. Okay. Same goes to all this. Now, for CPU fan 1, as I mentioned, is 1 ampere. The rest of the fan that you configure over here, right, are all 2 ampere. So my CPU fan 2 have nothing installed, but let's say you have plugged in a custom water looping pump, right, you can change this to water pump. See, one thing great about ASRock is this. I love it so much. PWM mode, you can set again the profile, or you can set it full speed on your pump, or you can custom. See, it's very, very, in depth. This is what I feel. Okay, right now I'm just gonna leave it to performance. Same goes to the chassis fan. For chassis fan, you can also set to water pump. Okay, in fact, what you're doing right now, right, when you set to water pump, right, take a look at the top. See, it will indicate water pump instead of chassis fan. See, it's supposed to be, see, this is chassis fan 2, it's supposed to be chassis fan 1. Instead, it becomes water pump, telling you that, okay, this is what you have configured. It's very, very detailed. Then for this kind of settings, right, okay, back to water pump, I'm going to switch this, no, chassis fan, no, wait, oh, chassis fan 1, I'm going to set it back to chassis fan 1. You can set it to PWM. Okay, again, the profile, whatever you want to do, performance, and based on what kind of temperature. It's like based on your CPU, the T sensor that you plug in, or the motherboard. Most of the time, all this configuration, right, I'll set it to CPU, because that will heat up the fastest. So it's time for you to kick your case fan, having the intake in and the exhaust out. Same goes to chassis fan 2 and the rest. You can configure yourself. Okay, now you want to have the graph instead of manual configuration, you can go to fantastic, and then from here you can use your mouse, select whatever you want. Okay, let's say it's okay, I'm not going to touch on CPU fan 2. You can monitor your CPU or your motherboard, then you can do custom. When you do custom, right, all these points will come to you. Okay, and you will highlight over here 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, and 0.5. You can just set it yourself. See, as you said, right, it will just change accordingly, which some of you might like it. So same goes to the rest of the headers over here. You can select and to do custom. Alright, just going to do exit, or last function, which is known as the fan tuning. This is auto tune, right? Whatever fans you have populated in your fans, it will calibrate for you. But I wouldn't use this, because when I use this, right, my AIO pump will become like PWM, not in a consistent rate. It will just go up and down, which will deteriorate your water pump motor faster. Okay, so do be careful when you're using this function. Security, in the event you have done all the settings and you don't want your sibling to touch, you can set a supervision password, which is you. And in the event, if let's say you do allow your sibling to touch but not your settings, you can do them a user password, meaning to say another account. So when they log into that account, right, they can do whatever UEFI setting they want to do. Okay, and not touching your settings. So take note on this. Now, secure boot. This is meant for people who like to play Valorant. ASRock have done a very beautiful job setting this as custom. Okay, and I don't have to worry that at this custom, right, I cannot install Windows OS on my M.2. Okay, for some reason they have calibrated properly. So this is at all time, right, at custom. So when you install Windows, install Valorant, right, you can just straight away play Valorant without any worries. Okay, even if you want to format your M.2, right, you can by all means go ahead. You don't have to come here to configure to standard. This is what I find out. And the rest, I wouldn't touch. Okay, best not to touch. Coming to boot priority. As mentioned to you, on EZMode, it's easier to actually do on EZMode where you can drag and drop. See? But of course, you can come over here under boot. You can select which to boot to. It's also quite easy. CSM is always disabled unless you are using legacy stuff, which I wouldn't advise you to do so. Then all this I will not touch. I'll just leave it as it is. Last but not least, exit. Self-explain, I don't have to mention.